Breaking tonight, Britain's Royal Navy just made a commitment that shocked defense analysts worldwide. The UK didn't hesitate, they deployed. Tensions are rising across the Indo-Pacific tonight. Australia requested nuclear submarine support through AUKUS, but instead of delays and diplomatic hedging, London sent their most capable attack submarine for 6 months. Everyone believed Britain's naval crisis would prevent meaningful AUKUS participation. Defense experts expected excuses about maintenance backlogs. Analysts assumed the UK would prioritize European waters over Pacific commitments. They were all utterly incorrect. Gibraltar, January 2026. Sailing past the iconic rock after departing Fastlane, Scotland on January 10th, HMS Anson began a deployment that validates Australia's strategic bet. The Astute-class nuclear-powered attack submarine wasn't heading to the Mediterranean or the North Atlantic. She was sailing for Australia for 6 months as the UK's first commitment to the Submarine Rotational Force West that was established under AUKUS Pillar 1 in 2022. Translation: London just told the Indo-Pacific that British commitment to Australia is non-negotiable. And what happened next? The nation that deployed its only available nuclear submarine to the other side of the world reveals exactly why Australia's strategic infrastructure is becoming the most important military asset in the Pacific, while traditional alliances transform into operational reality. The deployment nobody expected, dear viewers, in January 2026, something extraordinary happened in AUKUS implementation. Britain faced serious challenges. Australia needed support, and HMS Anson, Britain's newest and currently only deployable Astute-class submarine, became the asset that proved London's Indo-Pacific commitment wasn't just rhetoric. Let's be absolutely clear about what Britain is doing here. HMS Anson is sailing to patrol the Indian Ocean and Western Pacific for 6 months. This isn't a brief port visit. This isn't a diplomatic gesture. This is sustained operational presence in Australian waters, based at HMAS Stirling south of Fremantle in Western Australia, integrated into a rotational force structure that will permanently enhance Australia's submarine capabilities. The UK Defence Minister Luke Pollard told the British Parliament in December that deploying an Astute-class boat to SRF-West represents a core planning assumption for the Royal Navy under AUKUS. Think about that phrase, core planning assumption, not a possibility, not under consideration. A fundamental commitment that Britain is building its entire naval strategy around. But here's where the story gets fascinating. Britain is making this commitment despite facing arguably the worst submarine availability crisis in Royal Navy history. Britain's submarine crisis makes this deployment remarkable. The independent naval analysis site Navy Lookout reveals the stark reality of the 5 Astute-class nuclear submarines currently in Royal Navy service. HMS Anson is the only boat capable of deployment. Let that sink in. Britain has 5 of these submarines. Only one can actually go to sea. The Astute-class has suffered from persistent build delays and catastrophically poor availability since HMS Astute, the lead boat, was commissioned in August 2010. Right now, the remaining 4 operational boats are all laid up at Fastlane undergoing various stages of maintenance. They're pier side, non-operational, unavailable. This is Britain's most advanced submarine class. These are £1 5 billion attack submarines equipped with Tomahawk cruise missiles and Spearfish torpedoes. They represent the cutting edge of British naval technology, and 4 of them are stuck in port. Yet despite this crisis, despite having exactly 1 deployable nuclear submarine, Britain is sending that submarine to Australia for 6 months. Minister Pollard acknowledged the availability challenges, but insisted the government judges this commitment to be both realistic and manageable within existing force planning. That's diplomatic language for, yes, we have problems, but Australia matters enough that we're doing this anyway. This is the moment Australia needs to understand what's really happening. Britain isn't making this deployment because it's easy. Britain is making this deployment because Australia's strategic value to British interests is so significant that London is willing to send its only available attack submarine to the other side of the world. Australia's infrastructure investment creates strategic gravity. Why can Britain even consider this deployment? Because Australia spent billions of dollars making it possible. The Australian government has committed massive resources to upgrade HMAS Stirling and the adjacent Henderson shipyard. This isn't just about hosting visiting submarines. This is about creating permanent infrastructure to support British and American nuclear-powered submarine deployments, Australia's own submarine fleet from the mid-2030s onwards, and boosting Australia's overall shipbuilding capabilities. HMAS Stirling is becoming the most strategically important submarine base in the Indo-Pacific. Think about what that means. Not Pearl Harbor. Not Yokosuka. Not Guam. A base south of Fremantle in Western Australia is becoming the critical hub for Allied nuclear submarine operations across the Indian Ocean and Pacific. SRF-West took its first operational steps forward in November when USS Vermont, a U.S. Navy Virginia-class submarine, completed a submarine maintenance period at Stirling using a mixed American and Australian maintenance workforce. That wasn't just maintenance, that was integration. American sailors working alongside Australian technicians on nuclear propulsion systems, building the institutional knowledge and operational procedures that will define Allied submarine cooperation for decades. Other U.S. Navy submarines have conducted port visits to Stirling in recent years, and these visits are expected to increase dramatically as the base infrastructure becomes more capable. But HMS Anson represents something different. This is the UK's first sustained operational deployment under AUKUS. This is Britain putting a stake in the ground. The AUKUS reality that Washington is watching here's what makes this deployment geopolitically significant beyond just submarines and naval bases. AUKUS was announced in September 2021 as a trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Pillar 1 focuses on nuclear-powered submarines for Australia. Pillar 2 covers advanced capabilities including cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and hypersonic weapons. Since the announcement, skeptics have questioned whether AUKUS would deliver real capabilities or remain mostly symbolic. Would Britain actually show up in the Pacific? Would America truly prioritize Australian submarine construction? Would Australia develop the infrastructure and workforce to sustain nuclear operations? HMS Anson sailing into Stirling for 6 months answers those questions definitively. AUKUS is operational. The infrastructure is real. The commitments are being met. And here's the strategic calculation that matters. Australia is building exactly the kind of partnership structure that allows middle powers to operate with major power capabilities. Britain gets extended reach into the Indo-Pacific without maintaining expensive permanent bases. America gets a reliable partner with sophisticated infrastructure in a strategically critical location. Australia gets access to nuclear submarine technology and sustained Allied presence that dramatically enhances deterrence. This is the new geometry of Indo-Pacific security, and Australia sits at the center of it. The future SSN-AUKUS and Australian sovereignty Britain is currently building 2 more Astute-class submarines. One is undergoing sea trials now. The 7th boat is scheduled to enter service in late 2028. After that, development of the SSN-AUKUS class submarines accelerates. SSN-AUKUS represents something unprecedented, a jointly developed nuclear attack submarine class that Australia will help design and build. Not American submarines sold to Australia. Not British submarines licensed for Australian construction. A genuinely collaborative design where Australian requirements and Australian industry shape the final product. The first British SSN-AUKUS boat is planned for delivery in the late 2030s. Australia's first domestically constructed SSN-AUKUS submarine is targeted for the early 2040s. That timeline might seem distant, but HMS Anson's deployment to Stirling right now is building the operational knowledge, maintenance expertise, and integrated procedures that will make Australian nuclear submarine operations successful when they begin. This is how you build sovereign capability. Not through announcements and timeline, through sustained operational presence, technology transfer, and infrastructure development over decades. What this means for Australia's strategic position, let's step back and examine what Britain's deployment reveals about Australia's evolving position in global security architecture. First, major powers are willing to make significant sacrifices to maintain Australian partnerships. Britain is deploying its only available nuclear submarine despite serious fleet availability challenges. That's not charity. That's strategic calculation. Australia's geographic position, political stability, and military professionalism make it an irreplaceable partner. Second, Australia's infrastructure investments are creating strategic gravity. Countries don't send nuclear submarines somewhere just because. They send them where capable facilities exist, where maintenance can be performed, where operational integration is possible. HMAS Stirling is becoming that location, and Australia's multi-billion-dollar investment is what made it possible. Third, AUKUS is transforming from agreement to operational reality faster than most observers expected. Skeptics predicted delays, complications, and political obstacles. Instead, submarines are deploying, maintenance is happening, and infrastructure is being built on schedule. The pattern emerging across Australian defense relationships, dear viewers, here's what matters about this deployment beyond the specific boats and bases. Every time a major power makes a significant commitment to Australia despite facing domestic challenges, it validates Australia's strategic approach. Britain has submarine availability problems but deploys to Stirling anyway. America faces budget pressures but commits to Virginia-class construction for Australia. Partners keep choosing Australia because Australia keeps building the capabilities that make partnership valuable. This is how middle powers become indispensable, not through massive militaries or enormous defense budgets, through strategic infrastructure, reliable partnerships, and geographic positioning that creates value for allies. HMS Anson sailing toward Australia isn't just one submarine deployment. It's proof that Australia's bet on nuclear submarine capability, on AUKUS implementation, on becoming the Indo-Pacific's critical submarine hub is paying off. When Britain has one deployable attack submarine and chooses to send it to Australia for 6 months, that's not just a deployment decision. That's a statement about where Britain sees the future of global security. And that future increasingly runs through Australian waters, Australian bases, and Australian partnerships. The Indo-Pacific strategic geography is being rewritten, not through conflict, but through infrastructure, technology sharing, and operational integration. Australia isn't waiting for permission to become relevant. Australia is building the capabilities that make it indispensable. HMS Anson's deployment is confirmation that the rest of the world has noticed. Britain made a choice. Despite everything, despite the challenges, despite having only one submarine available, they chose Australia. They chose AUKUS. They chose the Indo-Pacific. And 6 months from now, when HMS Anson completes her patrol and returns to Britain, HMAS Stirling will have proven itself as a world-class nuclear submarine facility. Australian maintenance crews will have worked on one of the world's most sophisticated attack submarines, and the operational relationships that make AUKUS effective will be that much stronger. This is Australia's strategic moment, not someday. Right now, the submarines are coming. The infrastructure is ready. The partnerships are operational, and every nation watching the Indo-Pacific is recalculating what Australian power really means.